joined ITV in 1998 and then the BBC in 2007. And during her time at the various channels, she's presented all manners of fixtures, including the World Cup and the Champions League. Gabby is currently patron of the Disabilities Trust, Prince's Trust and Great Ormond Street, and Vice President of Sparks. Please welcome Gabby Logan.
Thank you very, very much, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here. And obviously we're all pretty much in similar environments, aren't we? We're all in our own home offices or our environments at home that we're finding to work in, and we're adapting and we're trying to work out what the future is going to look like. Well, sport is finding that very tough indeed. And I knew straight away as soon as it started that my working life and my ability to adapt was going to be quite unusual, because the one thing about television in the last 20 years and the changes that have happened and the platforms that have come along is that one thing's remained constant, and that is the viewing figures for live sport outstrip everything else. And so reality television came along and then different platforms came along, but the constant was that people wanted to see big live sporting events together. They wanted to have that water cooler moment. And so you can't replicate that. We've tried, obviously Match of the Day has become a kind of discussion about three old men's sporting careers. Gary Lineker's not on the line, is he? And it's been entertaining and it's been fun and it's been different, but it doesn't replace seeing that football that's happened during the day. And we're going to miss the Olympics this year. We're going to miss the Euros this year. And so sport at the moment is in this weird kind of hiatus where it's not sure when it's coming back. The athletes aren't sure when they're going to be performing again. So they're facing all kinds of challenges. But the title of this, when I was initially told about this opportunity, was Building a Winning Culture in Adversity. And the thing that struck me was that sports doesn't really have specific adversity. There aren't periods of time when you go, well, that was a hard time for sport. Adversity comes along in sports almost daily. Situations arise within matches and moments. And that's where the culture that has been actually fostered within those clubs or those teams or that individual's environment come into play. So in the few minutes I have with you, I want to have a quick look at some of the winning cultures that I've been fortunate to witness up close in the career that Nick just described there. And the most recent example I thought I'd bring of a winning culture that really bowled me over was when I went to visit Liverpool last year, and I went to Melwood to interview the key figures around the club. This was just before the end of last season, when Liverpool eventually were pipped to the post by Manchester City and went on to win the Champions League. And you think a few weeks before the end of the season would be a very, very stressful, anxious time for a football club that was on the precipice of potentially making history. And we've many times on the show I did then, was called the Premier League Show, we've many times been told we were going to have unlimited access. We were going to be able to see and speak to whoever we wanted, only to find ourselves in a porter cabin for 10 minutes with the assistant manager. Liverpool that day was so different. The door was opened, and it was as we were the first television crew to ever arrive at Melwood, right from the receptionist through to the people who worked in the boot room, the coaches. We met players, and of course ultimately we sat down and had an interview with Jurgen Klopp, who is the master and orchestrates this atmosphere and this environment. And it was clear from being around the club that everybody there had bought in to his culture, what he was bringing to Liverpool. There was a joy, there wasn't anxiety, there was a sense of gratitude as well. He introduced the nutritionist, who was a woman called Mona, he brought in from Munich, as the most important person in the club. He said to me, Gabby, go have lunch with the most important person here. And you could see what that did for her, because she knew her place in that environment. She knows she's not the most highly paid person there, because we all know what footballers earn and what they're worth. But her place was so valued there. She sat down, we had lunch, and she explained their ethos, their eating ethos, and how the young players at 16 years old grow their own vegetables so they understand where food comes from. And in that dining hall area, and I've been in those football dining hall areas many times, what was apparent was that there was no segregation. So you go to other clubs and the Premier League players sit in one place, the ground staff sit in another, and maybe the office staff sit over in the corner. At Liverpool, it was an open area. Everybody sat next to anybody else. So Mo Salah could be next to the chief groundsman. James Milner might be sat next to the head chef. And that was really telling for me, because the culture there was one of everybody being valued and everybody knowing that their place in that organisation was equally weighted. When it came to sitting down with Jurgen Klopp, I can tell you that the joyful, kind of jokey guy you see on the television is not an act. This guy has got so much enthusiasm for what he does and for the people he works with. We were told we had 15 minutes. Half an hour later, he was regaling us with his thoughts on Brexit, on his thoughts on architecture, his thoughts on science and the media. And he seemed to know so much about so many different things and was so interested in so many different things. But what Liverpool do is they keep things very simple. They're a very, very fit team, and that's one of the things they worked on. And in terms of adversity, well, it wasn't exactly an adverse situation, but to lose the league by 1 point, another club might have thought, right, we need to change our culture. There's something we've got to do different to get that extra point, to beat Man City next time round. Liverpool stuck to what it was that they'd all bought into. And we all saw the effects of that in the last season. Now, whether they win that title or not, and whether the league is abandoned or not, I can't say right now. I haven't got an exclusive for you. But I don't think even the hardest Manchester United fan or Everton fan would begrudge them getting that title. And I think that culture, that is about simplicity, and it's about everybody being valued in an organisation. And it reminds me a lot of the All Blacks culture, which is, as you may know, about the person rather than the player. When they're looking at who they want to recruit and who they want to bring in, the person is as important as the player. They don't go looking for 6'5", 220-pound individuals, or they seem to find quite a lot of them. It's about people who buy into their culture. That's why at every single match the All Blacks play, even a World Cup final, they leave the dressing room as they found it. They sweep up and they clean the floor behind them, which it sounds such a simple thing, but in terms of your value, in terms of how you value that shirt and how you feel great gratitude to be part of that organisation, I think it speaks volumes. They talk about leaving the shirt in a better place, understanding your position and your picture and where you are in the history of being an All Black. That kind of environment, again, promotes simplicity, because the All Blacks do the very simple things, the very basic things very, very well. And once you've done that, once you do the basic things very well, you also foster an environment for the people who work in that team to have the freedom to try things, to do things a little bit more creatively, whether you're Bowden Barrett and you're pulling the strings in that team because you know everybody behind you does the basics very well, or whether, for example, that the incident that comes to mind for Liverpool was last season in the Champions League game against Barcelona, when against all the odds they overturned that previous result, and Alexander Trent-Arnold took at that corner very quickly, and that is a player with supreme confidence at 20 years old to do that in that environment, because he knows that he has permission. It's not an overt permission, but because everything else is in place and the basics are in place, he knows that he can step up and do something a little bit different, create something that might affect a change. And if he does make a mistake, that's not the end of the world either. And that's come obviously from the very, very top. And I think finally, in terms of that buying into a philosophy and buying into that idea that you are part of that team, you can only do that, of course, if if you're physically prepared to put yourself through so much torture and torment, and you're putting your body on the line. And British rowing came to mind there, because this is a sport that has arguably been our most successful Olympic sport over the last 30 years. And it's no coincidence that Jurgen Klopp, the German, has been the head coach for almost 30 years. He was brought in 1992, and he has arguably achieved more than any other Olympic coach in history. 3 times Great Britain have been top of the rowing medal table. And it's this tiny guy from Germany who controls the destinies of these enormous athletes and puts them through grueling programs on ergos, on the river, in the gym. And I've been down to Caversham, where British Olympic rowing are trained, and I've spoken to some of these people to try and kind of work out what it is this guy has. And it was an interesting quote from Steve Redgrave, that he said he's open to discussion, but forthright in his opinion. And 99% of the time, he's right. So when you have a figure like Steve Redgrave with his 5 Olympic golds who says, yeah, I'll sit down and I'll see what your opinion is, I think it gives you a mark of the respect that they have for this coach. He's not somebody who's so autocratic that everything he said goes. And he has almost every right, doesn't he, to feel, well, yeah, actually, I've achieved so much that really whatever I say should go. He still has those conversations with his athletes and gets them on board. But also, importantly for me, he has men and women under his control there. And Catherine Granger said he has a high level of emotional intelligence as well. He doesn't just pick athletes on metrics, on performances and numbers. He looks at the people. And that is also something in sport, I think, which is really important. And I'll give you one final example of where the person didn't fit, and he didn't fit for lots of people, but the talent was there. And that is one of the players who frustrates me, I think, most in rugby is Danny Cipriani, an incredible maverick individual who can change a game. But England coach after England coach couldn't make him fit within the culture they were trying to develop. And it was a brave coach who had to ultimately show him the door every time, because a player like that can make those changes. But if he doesn't buy in to what the culture is, then he's not just somebody who's not fitting in. He's actually potentially toxic in that environment. And so I think, there are individuals who don't buy into a culture, no matter how brilliant they are and what they can potentially do. I think it's the coaches, it's a big, strong personality of a coach who actually admits almost defeat. Because I think most coaches have got this, there's a slight feeling with a lot of coaches that they can change somebody. It's like that kind of, I can be the one to change him. I can be the one that makes him work. And actually, I think even Eddie Jones couldn't make Danny Cipriani work for him. So, I think those adverse situations come for sport at different times in terms of this current climate. Well, just briefly, I'll say I think sport, and particularly the Premier League, have got to be really careful about coming back when the time is absolutely right, because that's a powerful statement, and not going ahead of the rest of society. Even though we all want to see live sport back, I think they have a real responsibility to do this in a way that doesn't damage the reputation of the sport. And if that means ultimately down the line players have to take pay cuts and be in line with the rest of the workforce, I think they can use that in a way to align themselves with their fans, because what they will realise more than ever is that they're nothing without the fans, and the fans obviously are desperate to see them back. But that relationship could come out of this stronger than ever.